I'm Ashton Addison from BlockWest Capital for Investment Pitch Media, and today on the Crypto Coin Show we have Dermot O'Riordan, Director of the Pocket Network Foundation. Dermot, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time.
Hey, Ashton. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to dive into blockchain infrastructure, one of the foundations of building Web3. You know, you need infrastructure to allow for all of these applications and tokens to be on there so people can trade and use applications for the future of the internet. And I know you know a lot about this, so I'm excited to dive into Pocket Network, but I'd love to start out our conversation, first of all, by just hearing a little bit on yourself in blockchain and how that led to becoming a director at the foundation, and then we'll dive into all the details.
Cool. Yeah, I've a great question. I guess I've kind of worn many different hats in my career to date. I guess I'm a bit of a generalist at heart. I've been a startup operator from the early days, kind of say back when Team of Six in Dublin with the Web Summit, now the world's largest conference, a technology conference around the world, a very much tech company in terms of how it runs and how they run their services. I was a lawyer, mainly advising large VCs, as well as kind of startups, right from raising their first kind of 50K, 100K check, right up to later stage unicorn rounds, and involved with different kind of startup communities. And for me, it's always been what's been the driving force behind that is like, yes, technology is this amazing lever for good, but it has to actually drive real impact in the human world. So I think communities and how humans interact are core to that. And yeah, I guess jumping ahead, just before joining Pocket, I was a partner at a $30 million seed stage fund called Eden Block. And my pathway into crypto, I guess, was while I was, I guess, probably 2016, kind of 3-4 years of working as a lawyer for one of the kind of top global law firms. And yeah, doing all these super interesting deals, venture firms and private equity, big ticket M&A. And for me, technology was always the pull. I kind of wanted to be on the other side of the fence. But actually, kind of the big aha moment really was with the rise of the DAO in 2016. And here was I designing these kind of essentially governance systems for these kind of very interesting kind of investments and companies. And here was just people just doing this on the internet, like kind of coordinating at scale. It's like, this is kind of hopelessly naive. It's crazy, but I kind of love this. This kind of feels more part of the future. So that has been the pull for me around DAOs, governance. How do we work better together? And we still haven't got the answer right for DAOs, but it's I guess one of the two main reasons I'm at Pocket here today. And that's kind of, I guess, I think what Pocket's solving is one of the most fundamental problems in the space. But I guess it kind of goes back to if you believe that the data that will reside on any open database, and I say any open database because that will include every blockchain, and I guess are these pseudo blockchains when zero knowledge kicks in. There's all these other new types with Urbit, there's IPFS. It's all this kind of new open world. And really, it's how do we access that? And I guess there's a kind of question there of, are the incentives there? Is the infrastructure there? Is it reliable? Who can get access at what cost? Are there privacy kind of trade-offs when you have to access that? And I guess at Pocket's kind of fundamental belief is that you should have fundamental access to what is this kind of fundamental right, so to speak, without any trade-offs is the kind of the ideal. And then the second side of that is core to Pocket's strategy and thesis is the only way to do this really is through the community. And actually that's kind of like decentralization is a great word and we all love it, but actually it's got to drive some real value. And that for me is we're using decentralization in terms of like how we build this together, how we kind of hopefully collectively run, maintain and govern this kind of a crucial piece of infrastructure. And I realize I haven't directly said what Pocket did yet, but I'm happy to do that. That's all there.
No, I love it, and great background, and I love that you're touching on the decentralized nature of it and the DAO aspect, and I think we're going to dive into that on the second half, just learning more about why it's important to have that kind of governance in the protocol. And you're dancing around it. We need the data availability. We need blockchains and pseudo blockchains and future kind of databases to be available and to be accessed in the right way. Now, let's just take a step back and look at it from the top level. And for those people who they're familiar with Bitcoin and Ethereum a little bit, and they're sort of trying to learn more about all these different solutions. Can you talk about the main solutions that Pocket Network is providing for the blockchain infrastructure from a high level?
Yeah, for sure. I guess the kind of easiest way to think about it is the way blockchains are run. They're essentially these P2P networks, and the way they're designed technically, just like the early kind of rise of the internet, is you should have your own server to access and interact with these blockchains, to kind of read the state and to kind of send your transactions. Realistically, nobody's going to do this. And also when you look at the kind of the size of Ethereum nodes today, I mean, it gets super, super technical. And thankfully, there are technologies and teams that are making it easier for people to run nodes and also run validators and so on and so forth. But the fact is, people pay for convenience. And naturally, despite people maybe aligning with the decentralized ethos and everything else, the whole of Web3 today really is run by kind of centralized access points. That essentially, that means people are running nodes on your behalf. And that's the likes of Infura and Alchemy. And I don't actually mean centralized in a bad way. They're solving core problems. They're like fundamental ways in which people can actually, I guess, more people can enter the space. Because not everyone's going to, if you're going to want to grow the size of the space, you need to make it easier for people to use it. So that's why we rely on these major companies to access all the different blockchains we care about. And you start with the big players like Alchemy and Infura, and you kind of work all the way down. Every single blockchain needs this access. Otherwise, your community won't be able to kind of access to, for example, your wallets, what's in your browser, reading past transactions, and then of course it gets into NFTs and all of this kind of fun stuff, and also the more interesting things you can do at blockchains, and even to send transactions. If not running your own infrastructure, you need to access one of the, I guess, these providers to do this on your behalf. And yeah, some people talk about this as RPC, remote procedure call, and that's really just how people I guess, kind of the outside clients or kind of applications, how they interact with the blockchain to read or write to it, essentially.
That's a great explanation. And when you mentioned Alchemy there, I recently saw an article that talked about the wealthiest people that are in blockchain. And often people don't think about the infrastructure side because it's more on the back end, and they had CZ at number 1, Coinbase CEO at number 2, and number 3 and 4 were actually the guys from Alchemy, and it just sort of shows that how important the infrastructure is and how all these companies are relying on running nodes. It sort of reminds me of Amazon, where it's like, Amazon is on Amazon Web Services. They're sort of running the entire, Web 2. It's very centralized. Almost 80% of the internet is being run on there. And it's an issue because it's a centralized point of failure, and they sort of control the market, and they can set the prices and do whatever they want. And if this continues on the Web 3 side, then it's probably going to end up in the same issues that we have in Web 2.
Yeah, completely. And I think, again, I guess there's the natural tension because the likes of AWS, and then in terms of our space, within Infura and Alchemy, in particular, because they've grown to be kind of really the number one. They have solved a lot of problems, and we have needed them. But you're right. I think the more that we rely on them, the more we give up in terms of our agency, our control, and these risks start to compound really in terms of as the size of the space grows. And that's, of course, the kind of basic thing of reliability. If they go down, that kind of means for most people that the whole of every blockchain you care about that you use them to interact with is also down. So there's very little fail safes there. People, obviously, we're not saying they only rely on one server. They clearly have pretty sophisticated setups, but it is a genuine risk. And we have seen the likes of Alchemy and Infura go down multiple times over the last few years. This happens reasonably regularly. And so that's one point. There's also, I guess, the fact that they've also raised lots of money for their investors, right? They expect a return. That doesn't mean that means there's going to be a natural margin there, and that basically applies a whole tax on everyone who's ever accessing Web3. People say the same thing about AWS. They have a huge margin actually at this stage, and it got to such an economy of scale. So if we think or believe that there will be more and more value existing on blockchains, these open databases in the future, I think it's fundamental that we actually think about how we overcome these potential risks, whether it's privacy, whether it's kind of the reliability facts, and also, I guess, even just kind of the access points, right? Just kind of maybe you're from a certain country, and if Infura has done that before, you will not get access. Again, that is a very, very small subset of users, but actually you're still excluding them. So I guess there's all these kind of different trade-offs once you kind of give up your own kind of control over how we interact and access, I guess, what is this fundamental infrastructure. And I guess certainly my bet, and I guess most people in the Web3 space, is that we want to enable more people to have more agency and control over, I guess, fundamental resources in terms of how they interact with their lives, in terms of that, whether that be kind of money, I guess, their other core assets, of course, even just the kind of the data that all these kind of systems rely upon, I guess.
Thank you for explaining that. And I have a few more questions about just the RPC endpoints and what exactly you can all do. I think a lot of non-developers, they just use wallets and transact and trade, and they don't really understand the details behind what are exactly all the capabilities that some of these infrastructure endpoints can do. From what I understand, one of the main things is if you want to run a node to participate in the network, or say you are a developer, you want to start building an app. Are those some of the main things that you're doing with the RPC endpoints?
Yeah, I think that's yeah. I guess maybe I'll introduce kind of exactly how Pocket does it in a second. But you're right. Any new blockchain starting up, they will want to have some other provider running nodes, because if the people building the blockchain themselves, they may be running the nodes themselves, but again, if they go down, there's no other redundancy. So they want to kind of remove themselves, that single port source of failure. Also, it's expensive, and usually early on, there's no natural business model attached to them. So yes, I guess if you want to read any data that exists on a blockchain, so everything from your balance, the type of assets, your transactional history, and anything more sophisticated, everything you see on Etherscan, everything you see in your MetaMask, everything you see in your Zapper, your Ethereum, and every other blockchain you're on, that's there's been some kind of RPC call, and there's some related data infrastructure connected to this. For example, indexers like the Graph, they will use RPC calls to index kind of their more sophisticated graphs, but it's all interconnected. And RPC, I guess, is almost like the fundamental request from a blockchain of like, okay, I want to get all of that data, and then I may sort it and index it into something more sophisticated for my own use case. And I guess how Pocket does it, and I guess that's why we're super excited about what we can enable. It's instead of actually deciding we're going to run all the infrastructure ourselves, or we're going to run nodes for any blockchain that you care about, so everyone else can access it. Pocket is an open marketplace similar to like an Uber or an Airbnb, and essentially using the right incentives, we can crowdsource infrastructure for whatever blockchain I guess there is really demand for. And that's why Pocket, as of today, actually supports more blockchains than any other provider, because Pocket's able to do that, because I can actually, all we need is the right incentives to say, hey, there's this new blockchain starting up over here. We'll actually pay you X amount per relay that you serve. And a relay is essentially a data request. That's actually kind of, I'm a user or a developer, I want to get the balance of Ashton's account. And then you send that to the underlying blockchain, say that's Optimism or whatever it is. And the person running that infrastructure, they'll send it back to you. In Pocket system, they don't just send that to one infrastructure provider. They usually send it to a group of many that can be up to 24 different nodes in a session. And so that even means if half of them have gone down, because they're all running different setups, they've got different kind of different clients, everything else, it's very unlikely all 24 of them will be down. And they're also, the way Pocket Systems works, it actually is very distributed around the world. So actually at scale, and we've even seen this at different times of the day, Pocket will actually have the best latency, because instead of actually just having all of your infrastructure stored in a data center in US East, which is probably just somewhere in Virginia, it actually could be next door to you in the next door house. Maybe someone's running some infrastructure, maybe they're running some nodes. So that means your latency is going to be a lot quicker. And the way the head of our protocol, who's this brilliant guy called Daniel Olshansky, he came up with this RPC trilemma, and he kind of describes it that for any RPC service, it's a trilemma. You can only have two of the three, and that's kind of the reliability, which is kind of like the redundancy. It doesn't go down. The data is there. And there's the performance, and that's kind of like, how does it scale? What's the throughput like? Are you getting kind of the data you want? And then the last piece is kind of how cost effective is it? Because you can maybe get super reliable, super performant. You can have all of this backup, and maybe only 10% of your infrastructure has ever been used. So if there's a big burst to your network, you can handle it, but that could be super expensive, right? Because there's a lot of additional costs you're suffering. So actually using an open network, and with Pocket, we believe we can actually solve this trilemma. We can actually deliver guarantees around this data that is more reliable, more performant, and cost effective at scale. And I guess that's what we're working with, and kind of the strategy that we're all kind of pushing forward, both at the foundation and in the DAO as well.
That's very cool. And I think I have a better understanding of it. And, I sort of see it as synonymous to like if you're Bitcoin mining, you're running your own node, and in that case, you're trying to mine Bitcoin and get a reward. But in this case, you're running a node and helping with the MPC endpoints to make calls to the blockchain, and maybe you need some certain amount of hardware to be able to run nodes efficiently, but you're able to host it and do calls for other people and be rewarded through the network. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. Essentially, like think about it like an API request. And actually, I think you just touched upon a super interesting thing. I read a thesis about this actually a few years ago. It's actually this problem was actually in some of the original Bitcoin talk forums back in the day, because they realized, of course, there's incentives for securing the Bitcoin network, but actually there's no incentives for actually serving the data requests. So actually, this was kind of something that was early posited on as an issue and a problem, and people argued whether it should be actually in the protocol or not. Again, it was talked about in Ethereum, and then actually when some kind of big crypto skeptics like Lynn Alden, who come from kind of TradFi, were kind of doing their kind of macro thesis and looking into, I guess, the broader crypto landscape. And they're looking at Ethereum, particularly because Ethereum differentiates itself from Bitcoin as kind of instead of just creating decentralized money, we can actually create decentralized applications and a whole new decentralized economy. But actually, one of our biggest critiques was that this whole decentralized economy is I guess built on top of very shaky foundations. It's essentially at the time was built on top of Infura. That's the access point. That for most people is how they, like your MetaMask is powered by Infura, for example, all of these kind of key fundamental services. And so when that goes down, so does your access. So it is a real issue. And I guess Pocket is essentially providing the incentives for anyone then, if you're running that infrastructure, of course, I'll open it up, I'll connect to Pocket, I will serve some additional API requests for whatever application or developer kind of cares about that, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned in the beginning about how when sort of DAOs came out, and the DAO back in the day, you got very interested in it. And I'm curious to know more on the decentralized community aspect of Pocket Network. And is it running like a traditional DAO? And how exactly does that work to make decisions on when's the next stage of upgrades for the protocol, and how do we determine who does what?
Yeah, great question. And yes, I guess in terms of how Pocket makes its system work to kind of serve RPC requests in this kind of efficient and performant way, it has its own blockchain. Right now, it wasn't possible to build it on Ethereum or any layer 2. But actually, again, I'm not the technical one who can talk to you about that. But actually, when I do chat to our protocol lead and some of their team about this, they believe actually layer 2s could potentially support Pocket in 3 or 4 years. But right now, it's not possible. Basically, if we want to deliver the best service for the whole space, again, Pocket supports everyone from Ethereum for another 38 or so chains. We need to kind of do it our way. And actually, that means Pocket has a blockchain, but it's a kind of a very dumb application-specific blockchain, and there's nothing programmable about that. So the validators secure that blockchain, just like they do in Bitcoin and Ethereum. But actually, the way Pocket's DAO works is actually, instead of actually like in most other DAOs, where if you buy the token, you get a vote. We made an explicit design decision when thinking about Pocket's governance. If we truly believe the importance of what we're building, we don't want it to be a plutocracy. We don't want the governance of this fundamental resource to be governed or dictated by wealth. It should be dictated by, I guess, your impact, your skin in the game, and what we call our proof of participation governance model. And so basically, if you're in, and it's evolving, right? So I guess, basically it means is you have to kind of prove that you have done certain things in the Pocket's ecosystem that we care about for you to get a vote. And so that means you've been running infrastructure on the supply side, you're an application or kind of a gateway that served a certain amount of requests, or you're kind of actually a builder and you've actually had a successful proposal, you've done some bounties, and there's different kind of things like this. And we're actually about to announce in the kind of coming weeks an upgrade to our governance. So it's going to be a bit more evolved. But to give you a little bit of data on Pockets DAO, for example, while there's some really amazing thinkers and a lot of kind of like the more interesting DAOs that have popped up in the last couple of years, such as Optimism and ENS, and a lot of great communities and everything else, because of the way the token wealth and weighting is what governs your I guess, your kind of governance power, their DAOs are more unequal than the most unequal countries in society. So I think the most unequal country in the world in terms of the Gini coefficient and like the difference between the richest to the poorest is South Africa. And for example, some of these other DAOs are more unequal than that. So if we truly want to build better systems that are better than the existing world, we got to do better than the most unequal countries. And ideally, we do better than the most equal countries and the most kind of meritocratic companies at large. And actually on the other side, because I talked about proof of participation, but currently Pocket is one person, one vote. So once you've proven your skin on the game, you get one vote. So it's Pockets is arguably perfectly equal. Saying that Pocket system isn't the end state. That's not right now. I think we're too far the other side. We're slowly coming back into the middle. We will be in the next system. We will recognize we're going to have basically 3 buckets. So there'll be a weighting for your alignment, kind of like your knowledge. So you know about our culture, our mission, our technology. You kind of clearly care about supporting us. And there's different ways of kind of quizzes and ways that you're showing that you kind of have your skin in the game. And there's a weighting for that. We expect that will be the biggest bucket because that's kind of the most people can participate in that. The next bucket will be impact. And that's kind of, you've done something that we care about. And this will evolve over time. Initially, we'll start it, but then the DAO will vote these in and suggest more. And that could, again, of course, be successful bounties, bigger grants. You've helped run, maybe you've helped with validator or kind of protocol upgrades, all this kind of stuff. And then the third bucket will be really our usage bucket. But the way Pocket's protocol work, you have to have a token to run infrastructure on the supply side. And if you want to access RPC data on the demand side, you also need to kind of stake your token. So that's kind of staked tokens represents your usage and your kind of skin of the game. And this all kind of comes together to have a pretty interesting model.
Wow, very interesting, Dermot. There's so many facets to building a governance model, and it seems like you've been following along for many years, and to figuring out how to have some skin in the game and have aligned values, so people aren't also trying to take advantage of the system. And I really like what you said there about comparing to real world countries and the imbalance of wealth. I feel like that's a great comparison to say, it should be better than what some of these countries have, this imbalance of wealth. It should be more equal and fair in a decentralized online way as well. So I'm gonna keep that as a benchmark moving forward when I see these DAOs. And now I'm curious, at the beginning you were saying, when blockchains, they start up, they need to run nodes, and often they don't have, a lot of the blockchains don't have a business model or don't have revenue, so there's a lot of cost involved in there as well. But eventually they find ways to make it work and to build revenue or through different avenues. I'm curious about Pocket Network and if there is a revenue model in this blockchain and in the protocol, and how you guys are sustaining the protocol and the growth of it.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And yeah, it's actually good timing as well. So I guess the fundamental kind of revenue model for Pocket is that if you want to have access to this data from any blockchain, you need to pay for those requests. And actually, admittedly, that wasn't always like that. So Pocket launched, the network launched summer of 2020. Actually, Pocket is actually 3 years old today, actually. I forgot to mention that. So it's been around a while, and it's been a bumpy ride, to say the least. But and early on, of course, nobody wanted to use it. It was janky. It wasn't good enough. It was slow, and we didn't even have all the infrastructure then. So actually, we needed pretty high incentives on the supply side to get people to actually connect with Pocket, run that infrastructure. And that was pretty successful. And then towards the end of 2022, demand really started to kick off. Pocket had a pretty rough year last year. There's no doubt about that. I think it made some pretty clear mistakes. We hadn't turned on revenue early enough, and actually we're giving out too much rewards to our supply side. People were making crazy money, and we should have moved quicker as a community. There's kind of resistance to that and everything else. And I think we probably lost a little bit of focus to some extent as well. And actually, while now our service and the quality of service is getting really good, I don't think that's the case. But basically, I think it's a classic case of expectations were way higher than reality in terms of where Pocket was early 2022 and very different kind of middle of 2023. So in middle of May this year, the DAO kind of brought in passed a proposal to charge every relay going through the network. So now we have some protocol revenue. I think Pocket ranks in the top 5 for any infrastructure protocols in terms of actual protocol revenue. So unlike, say, certain protocols where there are fees collected by the supply side, like liquidity providers and Uniswap, there's actually a fee going straight to the DAO. So there is genuine protocol revenue, and the DAO is burning that revenue. And so, despite, I guess, Pocket is, I don't know, wherever you want to, if you look at these kind of things or not, but like I think Pocket may be number 300 or something right now in terms of market cap, in terms of actually kind of protocol revenue. I think it's number top 40 or top 50 or something like that right now. It kind of varies, but it's roughly 30-40K a month in genuine fees that are being burned. And yeah, that's kind of, we're expecting that to grow in the kind of coming months ahead, as right now there is actually technically only one, we call them a gateway, and that's really going back to that point around people pay for convenience. Even when it comes to Pocket's protocol, most people don't want to interact directly with the protocol. So they would prefer to pay someone else to abstract that away for them. But the great thing is, you use any gateways on top of Pocket, you know that the back end is all decentralized. So you still get your kind of Web2 comforts, but you know that the back end is decentralized. And actually, we're currently onboarding up to 3, if not 4, more of these gateways on top of Pocket in the kind of coming couple of months. And they'll all be essentially selling access, giving people kind of new features, new kind of, new kind of front ends, new ways of actually getting their RPC, but all built on top of Pocket, which would really drive demand and relays as well. So yeah, I guess what the real takeaway is, I guess Pocket's economics are getting much more sustainable, and I guess the kind of we're trending in the right direction and no longer just in a pure burn money to grow kind of phase, which I think is obviously unsustainable.
For sure, and that's a great turnaround. And hey, I can't blame you for having a rough 2022. I think it was tough for most crypto companies with the collapse of all these different providers and just craziness all over. And whoever survived, it's a testament. And it's great to hear that the protocol's now generating revenue, and you guys have flipped the script, and now you're continuing to grow. And you mentioned there about a couple things coming up in the future. I'm curious if there's any other big points on the roadmap for what's coming up in terms of growing the protocol and adding new functionality to the end of this year and into 2024.
Yeah, great question. And I guess kind of it's kind of maybe a framework we use, which maybe is doesn't always hit with everyone, but we're trying to test it. I'd love to get some more feedback on that. But yeah, we kind of talk about our broader thesis or strategy is how we become unstoppable, because our purpose is to empower unstoppable open data. And the way we think about that is, how do we improve Pocket supply side? So actually that's kind of making sure that's healthy, diverse. Of course, you want to keep bringing in great new infrastructure providers on that side. But I guess some of the bigger drivers really are happening on the demand side. I guess there's, of course, I mentioned new gateways building on top of Pocket. That's going to be super helpful. On the governance side, we're making those governance upgrades that we mentioned. And then on the capital market side, actually just kind of, because Pocket's it's an infrastructure network, and people actually need to use the token to access it, to run infrastructure. But that's all been, Pocket isn't an ERC20 token. It's on its own chain. It's very hard for people to access. So actually we're launching Wrap Pocket at the end of, probably by sometime in September, basically. I don't want to jinx it by kind of giving an exact date. Basically going to be by end of Q3, and hopefully a good few weeks before then. And that's just going to be great in a number of different fashions, because Wrap Pocket means a representation one-to-one of Pocket on Ethereum. In terms of our DAO and our contributors, it means we can set up cool things like streams, so people are doing work and in the open, and they get paid, but the community will then be able to challenge them in real time. If they're not happy with that, they'll also be able to open these new streams for new types of work in real time, which would be cool. So there's a great level of transparency, as well as just really accessing what like kind of the best in class DAO infrastructures out there, and kind of some of this cool DeFi infrastructure. And obviously people who want to access Pocket to use it, will soon be able to buy it on Uniswap and then bridge that across to the Pocket blockchain and then kind of run nodes and all of that good stuff. And I guess connected to this, I guess I kind of danced around it but didn't directly say it, is we launched this program called the ERA program, which is basically kind of like our launch sequence for kind of, I guess, kind of Pocket's Apollo program. And that's the big new protocol upgrade that's going to be happening by end of Q3 next year. And that's going to completely revolutionize Pocket's blockchain. Pocket's current blockchain is doing its thing, but I wouldn't say it's and it's effective, but the next version will be kind of world class and like kind of really is taking the very best of what's out there and rethinking the whole system from the ground up. So everything we're doing is driving towards that. And actually, because I mentioned the community is so important and it is so important, this new program, it's like I think $1.4 million in total that the DAO approved. And there's different projects we're working towards. Some of them I mentioned, like Rat Pocket, but there's also actually a way for the community to tap into these pools of funds. So they can actually say, hey, here's like a request for proposal around this something really important that we'd like, whether it's actually kind of something to be built, some tooling. And so then people can compete in the open and work together. Like we really care about our values and working transparently and collaborating. And then the other side is we need to make mistakes. We need to learn, right? So actually there's ways for people to open up these mini seed grants called sockets. And anyone with some skin in the game in Pocket can actually open up these like 1 to 5K monthly grants. And this is all in the all in the open. And essentially DAO members, community members have kind of oversight and control over that. So yeah, we're kind of excited to see the community kind of take more control and kind of push more of the advances. But actually the key thing is that we're all aligned around our actual mission and vision, and we have a clear kind of strategy and roadmap in place. So it's not just kind of sometimes in DAOs, I guess there's too much going on and not enough focus. Like we're letting that emergence happening, people decide what they kind of care about, but as long as it drives one of our key priorities or metrics, basically. So there's kind of that accountability still there.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Very cool. I'm looking forward to following along with that. And is there a place where we can follow along with these updates that you mentioned coming towards Q3, and also just people that want to learn about the DAO and getting involved potentially in the community? Where's the best place to follow along and learn all this information?
Yeah, great question. I guess for sure, follow us on Twitter, right? Follow Pocket Network on Twitter. I think that's just great. And actually, we'll be doing more and more better updates on that. So actually people can follow around and actually see what we're doing. But actually, ideally, people want to get more involved. So if you do, I think it's cool to come to our forum. And that's kind of our governance forum where a lot of deeper topics are happening. Saying that could be a little bit noisy for some. So if you want to start with just coming to our website, pokt.network, that will link you to all of our socials, whether it's Discord, there's various unofficial telegrams as well. You can look into the documents, and there's links to ways that you can open up bounties, suggest ideas, and just start to get more involved and hopefully actually prove your skin in the game and actually earn a vote and actually start having kind of a say really in the future of Pocket as well.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Dermot. I'm going to leave those links in the description box below as well for the viewers to make it easy. I appreciate all your insights into the blockchain infrastructure world. It's quite fascinating, and I'm liking where it's going. All the best with Pocket Network on these updates that are coming in the near future. And let's definitely follow up then to get an update and see what the next stages are for Pocket Network.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ashton.